I'm E.
I'm Rob.
And I'm Spectacular Diagnostics, also Rob.
Yes, indeed. Welcome to the next movement, folks.
Yeah, as a shorty, playing in the front yard of the crib, fell down and I bumped my head. Somebody helped me up and asked me if I bumped my head. I said, yeah. So then they said, oh, so that means you're gonna switch it on? I said, yeah, Tase grip. Tase grip is the greatest. Knowing as a shorty, I was always told that if I ain't gonna be part of the greatest, gotta be the greatest myself. Hey yo, confidence up. I'm finna take off my shirt like Sharif. Government want us to stop for the Zangief. Good grief. Made a blunt out of nothing but keep. Then fell asleep. Dreamt I was riding on skis in the middle of Medellin. Too many people out here meddling for the medallion. They say a bunch of nothings and laugh it off, Jimmy Fallon. You ask if we have the juice, we got over a galleon. Battalion. In other words, we could lock off a block. But we're not, cause every time we try, here come the cops. Blasting that fire hydrant, they put all of that to a stop. How come we want fun, but fun don't surround around us? Instead they count and doubt us, hit quota for they bound us. Just a bunch of Bowsers, clocking the lousy hours. Don't want the hood to grow, no water for these flowers. I'm sure there's some good ones out there, but most of them are cowards. So I pay them no mind and use my superpowers. And yo, I'm out.
Spectacular Diagnostics, aka Rob. Thank you for joining us on the show. We appreciate your time.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, it's going to be good.
Yes, I believe it will. So let's kick things off by talking about Appetites. This is a project that you released last month, and it features Kip Stone, Wavy Bagels, AJ Wade, and some other pretty talented folks. So I have two questions about this guest list. What was it specifically about this roster of MCs that influenced your decision to collaborate with them? And after you made Appetites with this group of artists and had a chance to sit with the project, did you appreciate new things about them that you hadn't consciously paid attention to before?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was a different record for me in that, like I wanted people on this record that were, I hate using the term like, like they're bringing a vibe to something, but Wavy Bagels is absolutely that to me. It's like he'll he's not worried about, if people are looking at the wordplay always, it's like he's just bringing like this like great energy to things and kind of the flipping between the singing and rapping. And that's what I wanted on the record, and like I think Lord Queso immediately, it's like, he's saying really clever rhymes, but he's just so laid back. Or in AJ, there everyone on this record just I wanted it to have that kind of like effortless feel to it, but ran less fussy than things that I usually do, so that there were definitely, that was the reason these MCs were chosen. And I think, it's one of those records like I always like, hate it when it's done, and now I could like listen to it and I'm like, no, it came up how I wanted it to.
Yeah. Yeah.
You described it as sort of effortless sounding. I think Appetites also has a playfulness to it for the most part in both the production and the guest verses. Maybe like a lightness might be so like to frame it. Was there a theme? I mean, it sounds like there was a theme or focus that you relied on to kind of help you connect these tracks to each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a lighter record, and it's kind of weird that it came out now and it came out like before this election and all this stuff, because it was like when I was making it, the world seemed like a more positive place. So, it dropped and then everything was just like, oh God, it almost felt like maybe it wasn't the right time for this kind of a record, but it is what it is and it's out now. But I think I recorded a lot of it in the summer, like 2022, so yeah, I was just kind of coming out of working on Raw Lessons and on other projects, and it started out as this much more mellow, positive record, which, has dropped in less mellow and positive times. So
Yeah, but that, people still might need that.
yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, yeah.
Got to take a break from all that seriousness sometimes. With a project like Appetites, which includes both instrumental tracks and tracks featuring an MC, I always wonder about the process of the album coming together. One thing I always feel curious about are the decisions behind the instrumental tracks. How do you
Mhm.
decide how many a project needs or how to sequence them?
Well, this one I was kind of playing off of the record Natural Mechanics that I had done with the label Group Brazil before, and the kind of the instrumentals I had on there, which were a bit more, those were a bit more boom bap, and here it's like I knew I wanted it to be about 60-40 instrumental to rap, and um, they're definitely more experimental, the instrumentals on this one. I don't know. This one just kind of came together organically. It's one of those things where you buy records when you go out digging, and then sometimes you start listening to things, and they just start layering together, and it feels like almost like fate brought those samples together because I didn't think about it that much. They just worked that day, and then you have these songs, and then you're like, oh, okay, it just kind of naturally happened.
You mentioned Wavy Bagels earlier, and shout out to Wavy. Incredibly kind dude, incredibly talented dude.
Yeah.
He contributes to two songs on Appetites, one of them being Powers. And I love this song for a lot of reasons, but I think my favorite thing about it is Wavy's opening line. He says, confidence up, I'm gonna
Yeah.
take off my shirt like Sharif.
Yeah.
It's one of those if you know bars, and
Right.
I know because I've seen Sharif do this so many times at so many shows. And
Yeah.
so when I heard that, I felt immediately part of the conversation because I witnessed what he was talking about. So I wondered, generally speaking, do you think it's important to have these kind of relatable moments within your music, whether it's an instrumental track or it's one that features an MC that makes folks feel a connection to your work on a deeper level?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what kind of, like his record that he came out with this year with was a drive by.
Hmm.
Everyone loved it. And there's a reason because it's like he's that guy, he's just like he has that vibe to it, confidence up. I'm gonna take my shirt off like Sharif, and it's like he has jokes, but they're like, they're fun and they're relatable. And like if you're kind of part of the scene, like, yeah, Sharif's always shirtless in pictures, and it's like, man, this guy doesn't care. It's great. Yeah, Wavy's he's definitely someone I'd want to work with again. He exceeded any idea that I had, he was gonna do. It was really kind of like you just let him do what he does, and I didn't think he would do the song that he did or pick the beat he would. It just like kind of you let him go.
I also love that. Is it that song that he quotes Buster Rhymes that he starts out?
Yeah, when he's like, I
Yeah.
fell and bumped my head.
And then but then he makes it about Tay's grip, He's like,
Yeah.
yeah, Tay's grip's the greatest, It's like, yeah, those guys are just killing it right now.
Yeah.
Sketch 185 is also one of the MCs on Appetite. Such an incredible and unique rapper. He has this way of like weaving these tales in his verses that feel somehow both like abstract and practical at the same time. For his track on Appetites, was there any discussion between the two of you in regards to what you were looking for, or did you just let him do his thing?
I kind of, he picked that beat and then he just did his thing. And then you think, like, it's that song. It's like, it's a very Chicago song, It's like, it's talking about, like noise shows and crust punks trying to stab and writers trying to stab you. It's like, these are all the kind of like very shit. Like, yeah, we got crust punks everywhere and lots of like, my wife used to always go to noise shows and I could see a writer wanting to try and stab someone, they're all like very, very relatable, like kind of crappy house party art scene Chicago things, so no, he's amazing, and I think it's almost a lighter song for him, which I think is what was cool. Like when he did it, he said something. He's like, I don't know what people are gonna think about it, and I just knew that like everyone's gonna love that one. And like yeah, the dudes in England at BBC Six, like they I think they played it like 4 times. Like it's like Sketch has that that feel to him.
For sure. Yeah. Everything he does just makes me want to like focus in. Like he commands attention.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why, like, he's like the only feature on some of these Woods records and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, it's like, and he'll come on and you'll remember that he was there.
One of the other projects you released this year was a instrumental project, If You Feel Like a Lost Soul.
Yeah.
which I have really enjoyed. I always wonder with instrumental projects, like, was this intended to be an instrumental project from the outset? Do you typically have a vision for an instrumental project like this before you set out to make it, or does it just kind of get pieced together?
That one was definitely going to be a beat tape. And that was from, me talking to the guys at Blah Records in the UK about putting something out and doing a beat tape. And then, they there were a couple beats on there that originally were maybe going to be for rappers on that label. And I just started kind of working at a certain tempo, kind of like, 76 beats per minute. And that just lends itself to these nice, slow, moody instrumentals. And then once I was working on it, it just felt right to, we got, Marcus Pin, he does scratches for all my stuff now, and got Marcus involved. And yeah, I love that project. I mean, it was one of my favorites that I've ever done.
Yeah, shout out to Marcus Pin. I feel like he's doing everybody's scratching these days.
Yes, he did something for me the other day, and he told me the other people he was scratching for that I'll let the surprise happen. But I was kind of like, yeah, okay, doesn't surprise. I mean, like, he's amazing. He's gonna be doing it.
Yeah, I think this is a side note and maybe a tangent that at some point we'll expand on, but I feel like more and more there's a short list of names when it comes to like DJs to call on to scratch on records. And Marcus Penn is definitely one that I have seen frequently.
Well, I think he's easy to work with in terms of, like, he's not like a guy that you're, trying to book a feature from that is like, yeah, it's going to be, $500 or this or that. Like, if he works with you, it's because he wants to work with you, which is good. Cause like he recognizes, like, look, we're all kind of like losing money doing this. Like no one's making all sorts of money doing this. Like, maybe if you were in certain like vinyl circles, you were making money, but most of us are, really like, I don't know that this will even break even.
Well, shout out to Marcus Penn and all the DJs still scratching out there.
Yeah, man.
I have one more question about appetites. So why we do it is one of the instrumental tracks that you have on here, and I love it. The way that the vocal sample opens up, it's this guy saying "quiet on the set" is perfect. Because when I listen to this song and others on the project, it feels like I'm watching scenes from a movie you're directing. Is that part of the experience that you were trying to create for listeners?
Yeah, and I wanted to like put a lot of like Easter eggs in it. Like that's like from Mark Gonzalez interview. And I'm like a big Mark Gonzalez fan, like of his art and his skateboarding and everything. And he's just like this larger than life personality. So I thought including him with it, like that thing was just perfect. It was just like some interview where, like, they just follow him around New York and he's just, doing what he does, which is just, already kind of weird. So yeah, just that. And a lot of like, I always try and like put things in like movies I like, whether they're like, total garbage movies, like, the first Troll movie or, anything like that.
Yeah. I think that is such a talent to be able to put samples together like that and weave them in the perfect spot. It's always like something that I'm in awe of.
I think the minute you put any kind of dialogue on a beat, it just starts to feel right. So then it, like, like even if you picked something that you're unsure of, it'll like, oh, it starts sounding pretty good once the beat's behind it.
Yeah, for sure.
Your newest release, and if I have the count right, the third of 2024, is a collaboration with Kid Acne.
Yep.
Which is also your third album together, correct?
Yeah. Yep. Wait, fourth. Yeah.
Thank you for correcting me.
Oh, no problem.
Gary Suarez at Cabbage's Hip Hop recently wrote about it and compared the chemistry you and Kid Acne share to duos like Boldy James and Nicholas Steven and Freddie Gibbs and Madlib and
right
Lee Woods and any number of the producers he's made full-length records with. He said, referring to you and Kid Acne, that when the right duo forms, the entire genre benefits from their synergies. So what do you think it is about working with Kid Acne that contributes to this synergy?
I mean, I think we're both just kind of, older heads coming from, a certain place of like references and what we like and what we grew up with. I was a fan of his artwork before we even started working together. And that's how I got in touch with him. Like I had him do a little bit of artwork for me. And then like the album that was for, he liked it. And we're like, maybe we'll do a song. And then it just kind of spiraled from there. And like the first album we did, like we mixed it down and I went over there, my wife and I, like for vacation, and like we mixed the record down, so now he's just like, I talk to him all the time, which is definitely not how I, would have seen it going. But yeah, no, I think we just know what beats per minute work, what kind of sounds work, like what we're looking for. Yeah, it's kind of an effortless thing, working with someone where you just like you get it, immediately, like, no, that one's for him, that beats for him.
Yeah. What was it like for you to hear these comparisons that Gary made in that write-up?
We're immediately like Ed Kid Acne, he shot it to me, and I was like, wow, like he asked Gary right away. He's like, can we use this as liner notes? Because we're really like a love it or hate it thing. Like people either really like get it and they're like, okay, that's cool, you like, or they're just like, I don't want to hear this shit, get out, like, and no, so I'm glad that Gary's he likes it, he's not ignoring us. But yeah, it's flattering for sure. But I try not to even think about stuff like that, it's just because when I look at artists like Woods and stuff like that, I just like, they're to me in such a different echelon, like they're doing something that's like, I always feel like I'm still kind of imitating things. Or Kid Acne might too, it's like where we're kind of like working off of our influences and things that we like and like tributes to. And then you've got certain artists that are just like, or like even like someone like a Sharif, where it's like so unique and so like incomparable.
You seem to have made a point to work with artists from the UK. We're talking about Kid Acne. You worked with Sonny Jim and King Kashmir and Bisque,
Yeah.
to name a few. What's motivated you to work or collaborate with UK-based artists?
I always liked it. I mean, a long time ago, when I was working at a label called EV Records, in the mid 2000s, we were doing distribution for Low Life UK. So I was hearing, some of the British rap come out like around, 2005, 2004 already, and I already liked it. So then, just collaborating with people. First it was Ed. I think Kid Acne was the first person I worked with in the UK. And he started suggesting people to me. He's like, oh, have you heard them? Have you heard them? And from there, it just kind of like, it's like, yeah, it'd be cool. I'd like to, work with them. And, like I'm working on a record right now for the guys at Blah, that's going to be another one with like US MCs and UK MCs. And that's like just an even step forward, like even more UK MCs, we're even more obscure, so.
From your perspective, do you think American listeners have an interest in hearing what artists from outside the US have to say in general?
I wish they did. I think it's yes and no. I think a lot of people have difficulty with the accent. It's like they just like, they don't understand what the person's saying, or it's not what they want to hear. I think it's changing a bit with, the popularity of like grime music, and how grime kind of mainstreamed. But then again, that's like then a very specific thing and a very specific kind of slang. So once you're hearing people on like more straightforward hip hop beats, that might not be, what's jumping out at them. But I think it's changing. I think people they're way more open to it than they were in 2005. In 2005, it was really like, no, turn that shit off. Like, I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's changing for the better that people want to hear it. But there's always going to be like an asterisk by it. Like, it's UK hip hop. It's not quite the same.
I keep seeing this chatter on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it now, about I saw it more than once about how British people shouldn't rap. It really pissed me off because I like a
Yeah.
lot of British rappers. I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, no, it's like, I mean, some people it's just like, yeah, but then it's like, where does it stop? Does it like,
Right.
well, there shouldn't be rap in the dirty South. There shouldn't be rap here. There shouldn't be
Right.
West Coast rap. It's like people will find something to be outraged by and not like,
Always. Yeah. Annoying. Well,
Yeah.
let's move on.
Yeah.
So you might have already answered this already, but reflecting on your relationship with Kid Acne, having worked together for a long time now, how do
Mhm.
you think this partnership has changed since your first collaboration, and what's inspired the evolution and growth of your relationship?
I think that we're now just much more confident about
Mhm.
what we're doing and how we're going to put it out. The first record we did a few songs, and he hadn't released anything solo outside of his group Mongrels for a bit. So there was the discussion of like, well, should I talk to Lex Records, who he had been on before? And he kind of thought that door had closed. And then when we talked to him again, they were like, no, I really like this, like we want to put it out. So it's just kind of like been little positive reaffirmations that have been happening, and like Lex for me was kind of like a bucket list label, coming up. So it's been weird, kind of getting to work with people as we go, and like people that have, been artists that you've look up to. And
Mhm.
yeah, now it's like Edna, it's like we're always just planning the next step. We're always like, okay, well, we got these songs, we got these, like right now we have like, like, well, there's 20 beats lined up and 4 is written to, and this and that. So it's always just kind of like in work mode.
We stay golden. The game's rigged, but it's still downloading. Control the explosives. Dead Sea Scrolls with them source code pro tips. Now we're running on adrenaline, and the vibe's self-evident. He came in like a wrecking ball, I'm reckoning. World-class wrecking crew, Wreck-It Ralph represent. So them goalposts shifted, blink and you missed it. Keep it instinctive. Some we've been doing this shit. Scorched earth business, strength and resistance.
Deep dive into thought, replied in a swarm, lion face, alien womb, language reward, posted a brunch, proposing stunts, smoke clouded lungs, escaped marksman, holding a gun, substance, earthquake alerted media, televised, worst way, trophy given on Earth Day, helping hands, squabble, murky, lenses over birdcage, took his soul, cooked his soul, Hudson throne, spiral walls, elected ministry.
Okay, back to Fatboy Sharif for a little bit.
Yes,
So
of course.
he is on Mind and Motion, which is on the project with Kid Acne. And he and Kid Acne are two very different MCs with two very different styles. I was wondering, when you have this kind of dynamic on a project, does it feel like it's your job to marry the two energies together so that they complement each other? Or is it important to just let things flow as they are so listeners can truly get a sense of what MCs individually bring to the table?
Well, I think Kid Acne is actually, he did a lot of the mixing over there, of the vocals. So he's really, kind of obsessive about how vocals will turn out. And he's got a studio, got a friend down the way who always helps and does vocal mixes for him. So, I credit to him that he really kind of helps blend these things out. Like we'll pick the beat, and he wanted to work with Sharif, and I'm like, oh yeah, absolutely, you should do a song with Sharif. But then like, some of the mixing work, like a lot of it is done over there, where like he'll send it back to me, and I'll just be like, you don't have to do anything else, like it's done, like don't, like. And Sharif, being someone who really uses his voice as an instrument, he's kind of like the ultimate voice to like really play within the studio, where you kind of like you're really tripping it out and everything. So I didn't answer your question though. I usually think, yeah, it's like my job to try and like, marry the idea together. But in the case of the Sharif song, I didn't even have to, it was like
Yeah.
Kid Acne kind of just did that.
I will say too, I think Sharif has a really wide range and
Yep.
he can kind of just adapt to who he's working with. Like whatever the energy is, I think Sharif can usually match it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that beat is like this kind of this like, slow lumbering. And again, that track Mind in Motion, it's kind of like it's like a big inside joke where it's like it's from the first, the 1984 Dune movie. Is like, it is by will alone that I put my mind in motion. It is by the juice of seven. It's like, so
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
always like, into all that, like funny stuff. So that's how that song came about.
We recently spoke to Elucid, who I know you've worked with in the past, and at one point he was referring to the kind of mysterious way that emotion can be communicated through sound. And we're going to be
Mhm.
talking later about an instrumental album that seems to communicate a lot of emotion. When it comes to a project like If You Feel Like a Lost Soul,
Mhm.
what role does emotion play for you?
Um, Emotion or motion?
Emotion, feelings.
Emotion. Well, yeah, no, that album, it's like it's a very moody project, and I think there was tracks that I wanted them to really feel like, a rainy day, kind of isolated, and like letting some of like the sonically, like it really kind of take on cavernous sounds. It's like um I don't listen to Burial that much anymore, but like that's definitely an artist where he's had a few, of his albums where it's like the mood is just so powerful. We're like, whether you're just using a rain sound effect or anything, but I always like adding like nature sounds and things that just help, city sounds, things that help like kind of transport you somewhere. So it's a huge emotion, and I feel like the melody to me is way more important than the beat. Like I'm always melody first, then the beat.
Do you find that that's typically a reflection of like where you are at that moment in your life, or it's just like where the samples are leading you?
Yeah, I mean, I because I work on, a computer workstation, and I don't really use um hardware like MPCs and stuff. So I never start with the drums. I'm always like looking for the melody first.
Mm.
So it's like once the melody gets me, then I kind of go from there. Or not necessarily the melody, but the tone, the sound. So I always start with that. And I've always kind of like gravitated towards like, like sad bastard music. So, like the stuff like the If You Feel Like a Lost Soul album, really kind of was like, that was trying to capture that kind of like moody 90s, atmospheric hip hop.
Yeah, for sure.
We've been talking a lot about instrumental hip hop, and you've been often described as a creator of such music. This might sound like a really basic, maybe dumb question, but how do you define this genre? And what is it about your production that makes it instrumental hip hop?
I guess the main thing with instrumental hip hop is like, if it's the difference between like whether you're making more so just like an 8-bar loop, or if you're like trying to make more of a song out of it. But you can also make an instrumental hip hop out of just 8-bar loops, because something like Dilla's Donuts, he kind of reinvented
Mhm.
like what a beat tape is to people. And everyone now has these amazing, 1-minute snippet beat tapes. And yeah, I've done it too. So it's like it's a very different feel to it. So instrumental hip hop, it's like it's more that it's changed, it's different now. Instrumental hip hop can be like any instrumental can be instrumental hip hop now. There's instrumental hip hop in the past, used to be like, well, there's a DJ involved, and there's maybe a singer, and there's this kind
Yeah.
of baggage with it.
So I guess like if you're saying you're talking about a beat tape, so is that instrumental
Yeah,
hip hop to you?
yeah, I think so.
Okay. Okay. Rob and I were talking about this at the bar the other day, and trying to decide. Like we clearly said, there sometimes feels like a difference between the two. So I was just
There
curious.
can, absolutely. I mean, and I think, with, the eras, there definitely is.
Yeah.
Like we'll talk about a record in a bit, and that's like kind of like the grail of instrumental hip hop,
Yeah, for sure. During a conversation you had with Bandcamp a few years ago, you talked about intentionally working with underground artists and creating opportunities for folks within this community. And
Hmm.
you also said this about those working relationships. You said, I'm always trying to find someone where I hear the potential in what they're doing. I want to
Hmm.
work with them before they blow up. And when they do, it's fun to write yourself into that history because you worked with someone you think is special. How do these kind of investments inspire you creatively, and how do you see them impacting the culture as a whole?
Well, it's totally different now in terms of like, now that people have really blown up, it's really kind of odd that it's become like the mainstream thing. And I think it feels like there's so many more people coming up now that it's a lot harder to track,
Mm-hmm.
newer artists that are coming out. And that's where it's like maybe on Appetites, it wasn't always like this is like a newer artist that no one's heard of, but it's more that, it's what I was thinking were unique artists that were coming out. Whereas in the beginning, it was really kind of like, yeah, people hadn't heard so and so, but like now there's so many new crews and new people coming out, and there's all these, vinyl only labels that are coming out. So it's way harder to do.
Yeah.
And it's still rewarding to find people that, people haven't heard as much, but like Not Really is one that, like, people hadn't really heard a lot out of him. I think it was Dad Pod Rap Pod put him on, and I thought it was cool. I included them on something, and now he's doing like bigger records. So
Yeah.
those are still like, I like to see those wins.
Yeah.
It's like where it's like you're glad that someone that had faith in is like taking off. Like I hope after this record that like people see, Wavy, and people just like get even bigger, and like, and it'll happen, because they're really talented. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's not the same dynamic, but I know that I have been really happy to see people we've had on the podcast
mhm.
just blow up even more.
Oh, for sure. No, that's
Like,
great. I mean,
yeah, it's great to witness.
yeah, no, it's been, well, I mean, I think it's crazy with, obviously like how big people like West Side Gun and that have gotten. But then even people from early records that were already like kind of big, like Quelle was big in his own right, but I think
Yeah.
now he's like so respected. And so like it's a different evolution, but you've still seen it. You've seen like just like he had like a what, like OK Player sample pack he came out with. Like they don't just give you opportunities like that unless you're
Yeah.
really good,
Yeah, for sure.
Well, we've alluded to it a couple times, but
Yeah.
we're going to be talking about DJ Shadow and introducing in a bit. But I wanted to get your perspective on something that I read Shadow say in the Elliot Wilder 33 and a third book. Shadow talked about how when he was working on introducing, he would drive to Dan the Automator's studio in San Francisco, work till like 3 or 4 in the morning, then drive back home to Davis, California, which was something like 2 hours away. And
Hmm.
he talked about how all that driving gave him space to consider what he was working on, and
Hmm.
ultimately, that space benefited the music. So in 2024, technology has made that kind of commute to the studio unnecessary, right? Do you have a
Right.
practice? Do you have a practice when you're working on your music that allows for that kind of space?
I mean, I absolutely still love listening to music in the car, so like what I'll do is, like my commute to work is about 45 minutes to an hour, so like whether I was on the train or whether I had to drive or anything, like I still like, will always be playing music off my Google Drive. So no, I still do it. And I still like, I'll listen to things so many times before it's done. So, I mean, I'm still of that era where like you have to test it in the car. So, like Shadow, driving and listening to it and thinking about it and giving it space, like, yeah, no, totally. You have to do it. Or at least I have to do it. I can't be someone where like I heard it once and I'm like, oh, it's good, it's done. Book it. Like I'll fret over like the little things. Even if my mixes might not sound like I do, or like I'm fretting over it.
Also, in the 33 and a third book, Shadow talks about the press run leading up to introducing and how exhausting it was to have to answer questions about how he made the record and the factors that contributed to it, which sounded for him quite personal. He described a sort of psychological fatigue and described it as weird, like in some ways and unhelpful to his creative process to have to think about his music so critically. So my question to you is a question I'm not sure we've ever asked anyone, and that is, what's it like to have to do press for your music, to have folks asking you about like behind the scenes stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult with certain things. I mean, like usually it's like, I kind of approach anything like I'm talking to people, like I'm just kind of shooting the shit about whatever we're doing, and I'm not that stressed about it. But I think for him, I could see it being so different because he's a victim of his own success. When someone tells you that something that you did is that good, then it's like, how do you even talk about it? How do you even like, absorb that and have to like talk about it and not sound pompous or this or that? Like, like I'm fortunate that my music's not good enough that I have to to make those kind of constant like, oh well, I was just so sad that day when I found that break. But yeah, I get it. I mean, I get it. It's weird to talk about, music, especially like sample-based music. I feel like what I love about it is the chance, like I said, we're not, like, you buy records one day and you put them on and you find one record and the other one works with, like, what are the odds of that? When that those two records were going to work together, that you just bought, that you didn't listen to before you bought them, and they just like happen to work. So that kind of like serendipity, with it.
Right. And there's nothing to expound on there, right? I mean, it's just like, that's the answer, is like it just happened.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, of course, like what Shadow was doing back then is different, I think, than what happens for a lot of independent artists these days. I mean, he described like 8 hours a day, like doing press, that the label had. It's just a different world, of course. But it did make me think, like, yeah, it might be a little uncomfortable at times for folks to like talk about the creative process behind their music.
Well, especially he was like probably doing it overseas too.
Right.
It's like you're away from home, you're away from everything, and they're just like, yeah, let's just just drill you with questions about this record over and over again, and then people ask the same question over and over again, and probably every time you answer it, you start to question like what you're answering.
Producing.
From listening to records, I just knew what to do. I mainly taught myself. And, I did pretty well, except there were a few mistakes that I made that I have just recently cleared up. I'd like to just continue to be able to express myself as best as I can on the instrument. I feel like I have a lot of work to do still. I'm a student of the drums. And I'm also a teacher of the drums too.
Every episode, we spend the second half of the episode talking about a hip-hop album chosen by our guest. And tonight, we're talking about Endtroducing by DJ Shadow. Spectacular. I am so glad you picked this album. Last week, last Friday to be exact, was the first time I ever heard it. So
Really?
I really,
Oh wow.
I used to not admit shit like that on the show because I felt like it
Oh,
discredited me
that's
in
fine.
some
Yeah.
way. But I don't give a shit about that anymore.
Yeah.
I'd seen the cover so many times.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty famous. Just never listened to it. And as soon as I put it on, I was like, holy shit. I just like was blown away right away. And I will talk about everything I love about it later on, but first let's hear from you. So why are we talking about this album tonight?
Because for me, it really is kind of like it's for what people considered instrumental hip hop to be, it was really kind of like that first record that really broke that, took this mantle onto it, where he was doing tracks that were no intention of an MC ever touching them, and just letting, certain melodies ride over breaks that, like, I don't know, like at least I hadn't heard it before. I hadn't heard anyone do anything like that before, and I think now he's dealt with that, the burden of having made something that people love so much that every time he does something that isn't that, they're like, I don't want to hear it, so
Yeah, as you said, instrumental hip hop can be many things, but for me, one of the key things on this album is hearing all the different instruments he uses. Like they're
mhm.
so pronounced throughout the entire album, like the pianos,
Yeah.
the harp, the drums. Holy shit! Like it's just
Yeah.
every instrument he uses is just it's like an extension of his voice, and
Mhm.
every different piece is so powerful, whether it's played fast or slow, it doesn't matter. So that's really what makes this like instrumental for me, like in that sort of definition.
Yeah, for me, one of the things I love about the record is that, he introduces things that he'll play later. Like early on in the record, just those little snippets where, so like he's doing all this world building as it goes. And by the time you get to the end and you get to like, what does your soul look like, part 20 or whatever, like it's this final like, bah, like he's gone through everything.
Yeah, there are themes,
Yeah, yeah.
sonic themes that pop up throughout the album. I love this record. It's probably one like top 10 all-time any genre record for me for a number of reasons, but for a large reason is 2010, the building that I lived in at the time had a fire, and
Mm.
everybody who lived in that building, it's like 100 units in there, lost everything. And so the only music I had was the CDs that were in my car at the time, and Introducing was one of them. And so for weeks, it was like all I listened to when I was in the car. It sustained me. It was like my anchor. It was something familiar that I knew that I loved, and I will always love this record, in part for that reason, for that experience. But beyond that, like we're saying, in my mind, it is the first like instrumental hip hop album. I know there probably were others made before it, but
Right. But it's the one that like it really defined the genre at that time, and it was really kind of like the milestone of like, and it just like the yardstick of like how good it could be.
yeah,
And like RJD2 had a great album, but immediately he had a great album that people said it's like DJ Shadow's Introducing, but like anytime you do it, like that's going to be brought up. It's the elephant in the room. Like you can't ignore that record if you're making a record that's instrumental hip hop, because they'll like compare it to it and say, well, is it as good as that? And how can it be as good as that? Because that came first,
right.
Yeah.
so
Yes, and everybody's heard it, and
yeah.
it's an unfair comparison for sure.
I don't know how to really say this so that people understand, but when I listen to this album, I feel so much movement through it. So much so that like I feel like I have to be moving when I'm listening to it. So I was telling Rob the other day, I was in the train station and I was like kind of walking with like purpose because I was trying to make it in time. And I had this playing in my headphones, and it was like the perfect soundtrack. Like the way that the music was moving, the way that I was moving. I don't really know how to intelligently put that into words, but there's just these moments that just like,
Yeah.
and you're just moving through the music, like with the music as you're listening to it. Maybe that's why I feel like I need to physically move whenever I hear it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those albums that really, it does feel like that, kind of like the soundtrack to your life. Like no matter what you're doing or what's going on, you know, the emotion and the samples and the way that he arranges it, like it's, and I mean, that's why I picked it. It's just one of those records that you're just like, yeah, he really got, you know, lightning in a bottle with that.
As a producer yourself and someone who makes instrumental albums in 2024, what appreciation do you have for a project that samples as heavily as Introducing does?
I mean, I pretty much work exclusively with samples. So, you know, that was kind of like when I made Ancient Methods, that was the whole kind of, you know, joke about the name is like I don't know how many people work exclusively with samples, mostly from vinyl. Like I'll use YouTube for like audio bits, but pretty much everything is from vinyl still, and that's still kind of how I work. So, I mean, I appreciate listening to Shadow when back now, where it's like, it's still unbelievable how much separation he gets between the sounds, you know, between the bass lines, between the piano. And like when, you know, maybe he'll only bring in like two or three sounds, but they're perfect. You know, it's like, it's not just like, you know, throwing a bunch of crap on it just because you can. Like it's all like so measured and it's really well spaced out. So, I mean, like I feel like I'm just getting much better at, you know, mixing things down now. And, you know, I still go to that record and kind of like, you know, get inspiration of like how to separate things better and how to space it out. And then it's funny because you think like this kid, he did it like in his 20s and I'm like 48 years old and I'm like still trying to like figure it out, you know?
I think it's important to note the like difference in technology, and you know if you think about having to learn to make mixes on a 4-track machine
Right.
before you get to Pro Tools,
Yeah.
then yeah, when you get to Pro Tools, you might feel like you have a bit more like mastery of layering things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because it gives you, you know, your options are so much more limitless. I was trying, like, I use Logic, and I try and use Logic like I have an endless 4-track. You know, basically, like I try not to overdo effects on it. Like I'll bring in my elements, and then I really am more so just like using compressors and EQs and a little bit of delay, but I'm not like building sounds out of the software, because then when I do that, I'm sure there's people who could do it and it sounds amazing, but when I do it, it just sounds like a computer to me, you know?
I don't know if you said this, Spectacular, but when did you hear this album for the first time?
Oh God. Yeah. Probably when it came out, you know, so I was
Okay.
like, oh God. So it came out, what, 96 was it? 90.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I was like, you know, I graduated high school in like 95. So I was, you know, not even 21 yet.
Okay.
And, you know, it was one of those records that, you know, you found because, you know, a magazine told you about it. From there, it's like you just wanted to hear more, and you wanted to hear, you know, more from the label. And you're like, what label is that on? You were like trying to do research on like Moax and Ninja Tune and all these things and trying to find out more about it, which now is super easy. But at the time, it was a bit of a struggle. Like, you know, you're a kid, so you don't really have any money. And you're like,
Yeah.
you know, trying to buy CDs and magazines and, you know, get what you can.
Yeah. I couldn't believe this came out in 1996. I had no idea. Like I thought it came
Yeah.
out in like early 2000s, and Rob was like, "No, it came out in 96 when we were talking about it the other day." I was
Yeah.
like, "What?"
I mean,
The
it's
fuck?
crazy. It is crazy.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I mean, like, even if you're looking at like from rap world, like
Yeah.
Wu-Tang Forever had not come out yet, you know, and he put this out, you know?
It's just really wild to me. As soon as I heard it, it reminded me of trip hop that I love. Like
Yep.
it had that feel for me, and I think it was popular in the UK, right?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Well, Wax was based in the UK.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's around the time that like that label trip hop like started to become.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And some of it was good, you know. It's like, I think a lot of people
Yeah.
kind of got, like it got villainized, but some of it came out was like very good. And like, I could, if like a trip hop mix came out on, Spotify or Apple Music now, I'd be like, I don't know, there's some jams on there. I mean, I'm still gonna listen to it.
Is this an album that you still go back to?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like it almost feels seasonal too. Like,
Okay.
oh, there's a chill in the air, and like you start to like, take your DJ Crush albums and DJ Cam and DJ Shadow and these, producer albums from the late 90s that I love and just like kind of go back to them and like listen to them in the car, listen to them wherever you're going.
When the bomb's activated, it mutilated the leg and arms.
What's the story behind? I'm sure you all know this. What's the story behind the photo?
Oh, I was hoping you bring the photo up. I was hoping you bring the photo up. I discovered this album when I was in college, right? And the internet was like kind of new at that time. And so learning things about people like you were talking about earlier, Rob, like not exactly easy. And I would just love the music. And so I never questioned anything.
Right.
So it wasn't until this week that I was reading about the album, and everybody else probably knows this. I feel like everybody knows this. That these are not just random people on this.
Right. It's like Lyrics Born in a wig and like like Benji B and like
it's Lyrics Born and X Chief Excel from Black Alicia.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I was shocked when I read that this week.
Yeah.
I always thought it was two random dudes.
In the wig.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah. Who took it?
B plus took it.
Yeah, shit. Okay. Oh, okay. That I think I did know that. Yeah.
I'm not sure he was even B plus like at that time. Or
I think he might have been. There's, that's the cool thing about that era is that you had this crossover between, like people that did skateboard photography and band photography and all that stuff. And they all kind of like, like all those guys that like, did Jackass, like they did like a lot of really cool art shit before they did Jackass, it's like that was going on in the 90s,
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to listen to this album. I love it. I listened to it so many times since I heard it on Friday. It's perfect.
It's, you could go to the second one, The Private Press is still very good. That was the one that people still really like, and it has like its high points are just as good. I think it just has a few that, like don't hit as much, but like it is really good high points.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to digging into that after hearing this one. I'm excited. Well, Spectacular Diagnostics, thank you for this conversation. It's been lovely. We really appreciate your time. Before we go, is there anything that you want folks to know about where they can get the new projects? Any upcoming things you're working on that you want folks to know about?
Sure. So, yeah, the vinyl for Appetites should be in hand like end of January, beginning February. Same with the Kid Acne record. And then I don't know when this is going to press, but I've got basically like a 10-year edition of my first record from 2015 that's going to go on pre-order this Friday.
Okay.
And we're basically, you know, getting it back on streaming because it had fallen off because it had, you know, like West Side Gun and Big People on it that like I couldn't put it, you know, onto like DistroKid and places like that. They block it now. They'll be like, unless West Side Gun emails us saying that it's okay, like you can't, you know, have it on here. And I'm just like, I can't bother this guy, like, you know, now. So I got the label in Germany that, you know, they know people's managers and they were able to like take care of everything, you know. So so that's going to be coming out end of the week, like the, you know, single, and then the, you know, vinyl will be available in January. And that's like, it's good because like it's kind of a full circle thing, you know, like you were saying, like, you know, building records. It's like, well, I still need to like, you know, not write myself out of the history because DistroKid won't let me, you know, put something on Spotify. So, you know, I had to like make a point to not let that die.
Absolutely. There are going to be some goodies on that, right? Some unreleased tracks. Is that?
Yeah. So I did like kind of a more contemporary remix of the track with West Side Gun and Conway. And then I did a song with Conway and Chris Crack called Rambo Bars. I remixed that, put Declaim on it. Marcus Pin did scratches, and Declaim and we got like a full record coming in the spring too. So that's on the way too.
That track with Conway, Chris Crack, and Declaim. Find those three rappers on a song anywhere else.
But no. And I was working with Declaim and I was telling him about it, and he's like, "You're gonna put me on that song. You're gonna put me on that." He like, you know, I was like, okay, I'll do it. You know, like, you know, it's like he was an artist that I like been a fan of for so long, and you know, it was really cool that, you know, we finished up this record, and it's called What If, and it's kind of like a what if scenario if Declaim was like a gangster rapper. And it's very different for him, but he still does it like in his style, and he like barely swears on it, you know, which is like amazing. It's like he's a gangster rapper explaining all these like scenarios, but he like doesn't curse, you know. And you're just like, he's really unique, you know.
Yeah. All right, folks, this has been The Next Movement. Thanks for listening. Thank you again, Spectacular Diagnostics. Peace.
Let your duck fly. It's still many hours before dawn. During the daytime, I am always away.